DJ Octavio, Commander Tarter, Mr. Grizz, Order. These are the main 4 Splatoon villains, and only one of them was handled well. So what happened? Let's talk about it.
Quick disclaimer! This is all my opinion. Do not take this as objective fact, and you're welcome to disagree with me on this. This is less of an informative video, I'd say, and more of an opinionated rant. Something that you can have on in the background while you're drawing or whatever, so keep that in mind. Also, hi, I decided I wanted to do more IRL stuff, but I don't want anyone knowing what I look like, hence this. But anyway, out of the 4 main villains, there's only one that isn't weighed down by some sort of major flaw, and that one villain is Tarter. Tarter is easily the most well-written and well-executed villain in the entire series, and understanding what it got right will play an important role in identifying what the other villains got wrong. I absolutely love Tarter. Like I said, I think it's easily the best Splatoon villain, and I will sing its praises till the day I die. And my subscribers seem to agree with me on this. I ran a poll a while back asking them who their favorite Splatoon villain was, and Tarter won by a good amount. So why exactly is Tarter so popular? Well, let's talk about it. Backstory. Tarter was an AI created by the Professor, yes, that Professor, with the purpose of passing down the knowledge of humans to the next intelligent life in hopes that they don't repeat humanity's mistakes. However, thousands of years of being alone caused its programming to corrupt, which turned it into a vengeful and genocidal maniac. It saw Inklings and Octolings as inferior and undeserving of the knowledge of humans, so instead it planned to replace them. It created a series of underground test chambers to find subjects that it deemed superior. These test subjects were then blended alive, and their DNA was extracted in order to create a bioweapon that would wipe out all life on the planet and replace it with a new ultimate lifeform. So already a really compelling backstory and a completely new direction for Splatoon villains, since we didn't know much about humans at the time Octo expansion released. But it gets better, because the build-up surrounding Tarter's reveal is absolute perfection. Everything from the telephone to the realization that the 4 things that you're collecting are all parts of a blender, and then another realization that the route you used to escape to the surface is actually a mega weapon shaped like a human statue, which was hinted at by the escape phases all being named after organs in the human body, and it all culminates with the telephone that was there since the beginning of the game pulling the veil off on what it is and revealing that you were just a pawn in its master plan to eliminate all life on Earth and reshape it into a new ultimate life form. Like, this is genuinely some of the best writing, build-up, and execution of a villain I've ever seen. And to this day, I still find myself thinking about Tarter from time to time. That's how you know a villain has made an impact. Like, I did not expect Tarter to be this good, considering that the villain that came before it was Splatoon 2 Octavio, so this was quite the jump. Tarter is proof that Splatoon can have complex villains and handle them really well. So what the hell happened with the other villains? This one hits close to home. I really like Octavio. He's one of my favorite Splatoon characters. And my subscribers seem to like Octavio as well, since he was the second most popular choice in the poll I ran, which may or may not be the result of all the Octavio propaganda on my channel, but that's unimportant right now. I think Octavio has a very compelling and multi-layered backstory, and his relationship with Cuttlefish is one of my favorite aspects of Splatoon lore. But my god, this dude has to be the most disrespected character in the entire series. Hell's bells, like what's the point of giving him such an interesting backstory if he's just gonna be a punching bag for the new Squidbeak Splatoon? And when his backstory finally does get recognized, it happens completely out of nowhere during the last 5 minutes of the game with basically no build-up. The reason this frustrates me so much is because, like I said, Octavio and Cuttlefish have a really interesting backstory that is absolutely full of material to be utilized in the story, and they barely used any of it. They don't even explain why Octavio stole the great Zapfish, and that's my biggest issue with how DJ Octavio was handled. His backstory and motivations are never really stated in the main story, and instead they just leave us to piece it together through sunken scrolls and other stuff. That's just bad storytelling in my opinion, and it sucks because Octavio was a really interesting character once you know his backstory. So let me tell you his backstory and motivation. The reason Octavio stole the great Zapfish is not because he's just this evil bad guy who wants to steal things for fun. No, it's because he's the leader of a society that's on the verge of collapsing due to a lack of energy, and Octavio is willing to do absolutely anything he could to ensure that doesn't happen. Well, why is Octarian society running out of energy? Oh, it's because the Octarians were forced underground after losing a literal race war against the Inklings. A race war which, mind you, forced Octavio to turn on his best friend. You know the not evil, just broken trope? Yeah, that's basically Octavio. Although to be fair, I do understand why this information wasn't directly told to us in Splatoon 1, since that was when the series was still finding its footing. Like, imagine you're a 7-year-old playing this game and one of the characters just says, "Hey, you know that bad guy that we're trying to stop? Yeah, he used to be my best friend before a race war forced us to turn on each other." It would instead make more sense for this information to be expanded on in the sequel. So how was Octavio handled in Splatoon 2? Splatoon 2 Octavio was a joke. In fact, the entire Splatoon 2 hero mode was a joke. It's basically a carbon copy of Splatoon 1's hero mode, which means that Octavio is a carbon copy of how he was in Splatoon 1, so there's nothing new to talk about. But Splatoon 3 Octavio is different, because Splatoon 3 was the Octavio redemption arc. In Splatoon 3, he decides to finally set aside his differences with the Inklings and helps Neo Agent 3 stop Mr. Grizz from destroying the world. After 2 games straight of just being the new Squidbeak Splatoon's punching bag, they finally gave Octavio the character development he'd been needing for so long. That being said, Nintendo definitely could have done better here. So Octavio shows up at the beginning of the game because some of his troops have gone missing and he thinks the new Squidbeak Splatoon is behind that. I wonder where he got that idea. So you fight him, and then he just for 90% of the story and only comes back at the very end when he suddenly has a change of heart and decides to help Neo Agent 3. The problem is, like I said, there was absolutely no build-up or anything prior to this happening. It's payoff with no build-up. What's even more frustrating is the promos for Splatoon 3's hero mode made it look like Octavio was gonna be a supporting character. I mean, he was literally there when Neo 3 and Cuttlefish fell through the hole at the beginning of the game. How come he didn't end up in Alterna? Where did he go? Octavio really should have been more involved in the story. This was the perfect opportunity to learn more about his backstory in Octarian society, and they completely fumbled. But even if it could have been handled better, I still absolutely loved that Octavio even got a redemption arc in the first place. In fact, it's probably my favorite moment in the entire series, because it was Nintendo recognizing the lore. Inklings and Octolings used to live together in peace before they were forced to go to war together over circumstances that were out of their control. Octavio helping the new Squidbeak Splatoon here, to me at least, is him realizing that the entire world is in danger, and the only way it can be stopped is if he sets aside his differences with the Inklings once and for all. And he even played the Calamari incantation. You're not dropping this beat on our turf. Damn, I love that line. And seeing Cuttlefish and Octavio together at the Grand Festival, just absolute perfection. But even though Octavio got a happy ending, my god, he deserved so much better. This one pisses me off the most. Mr. Grizz is an insult to Splatoon lore, and I hate everything he stands for. I liked Mr. Grizz being the villain of Splatoon 3. I thought that it was a really cool direction to go in, especially because he has all the characteristics of a villain. I mean, he's this greedy CEO who's responsible for the mass murder of millions of Salmonid, who, by the way, are sentient beings like the Inklings and Octolings. I mean, that's pretty evil, and I really wanted to like Mr. Grizz as a villain, but they ruined it by making him a bear! What the hell happened? Splatoon 2 had created so much build-up and speculation surrounding Mr. Grizz's true identity, with so many different ideas for what he could be. He could be an Inkling, an AI, a jellyfish, or my personal favorite, a water bear. Yeah, there was always the possibility of him being a bear, as hinted at by the signs in the ruins of Arc Polaris, but I, as well as many others in the Splatoon community, thought those signs were just meant to be a fun little Easter egg, and not confirmation that Mr. Grizz was actually a bear. Because frankly, the idea of him being a bear is really stupid. Like, it seemed way too simple and predictable, especially compared to how complex the villain of the last game was, not to mention the fact that it would completely break the lore. So you can imagine my reaction when Splatoon 3 came out and I saw this. Like, I felt genuinely insulted when it turned out that he was an actual bear. I thought there was no way Nintendo would go there because, again, that would completely break the lore, and Splatoon is a series that's known to take its lore very seriously. I thought Tarter would create a new standard for Splatoon villains, but it turns out that it did the exact opposite. Why couldn't he have been an Inkling or a jellyfish? Why did he have to be a bear? If Nintendo thought that him being an Inkling or Octoling would be too complicated, well, Tarter was a very complicated villain, and they pulled it off really well. That's part of the reason why so many people like Tarter so much. Also, this isn't really important to the argument, but I still wanted to talk about it. If Mr. Grizz's whole thing is that he wants to keep his identity a secret and he doesn't want people finding out that he's a bear, then why would he name himself Mr. Grizz? You're not hiding anything! But to be fair, I guess that's like the Splatoon equivalent of someone calling themselves Mr. Velociraptor and then they turn out to be an actual Velociraptor. No one would expect that because Velociraptors are extinct. So I guess him being called Mr. Grizz makes sense in universe. That's not the reason why him being a bear is such a problem. The real reason is that, like I said, it completely breaks the lore. And by that, I mean it completely destroys the importance of the Judds being the last mammals on Earth. The whole gimmick of Splatoon lore is that it takes place in a world where mammals have gone extinct. That's why the Judds are so important. They're the only mammals left on the planet. But now because of Mr. Grizz, there's the possibility of some mammals still being alive during the Mollusk era, despite them literally saying that the Judds are the only mammals left on Earth. Like, at that point, why are they even there? Do you see why this is a problem? I also have a problem with Mr. Grizz's motivations. Remember when I said that I thought Tarter would create a new standard for Splatoon villains, but it ended up doing the exact opposite? Yeah, both Mr. Grizz and Tarter have basically the same motivation, except Mr. Grizz's motivations are a lot more more vague. They both want to use a type of ooze that causes you to lose your free will upon contact with it to reshape the world in their image. Mr. Grizz is basically just a reskinned version of Tarter, and this is actually my biggest issue with Splatoon villains and where this whole video started. Tarter, Mr. Grizz, and Order all have the same goal of reshaping the world in their image. Tarter wants to kill a life and replace it with a new ultimate life form, Mr. Grizz wants to turn everyone into mammals, and Order wants to create a perfect world where free will doesn't exist. I feel like Nintendo thought, well, Tarter was pretty popular, why don't we just make Tarter again? Okay, I just spent a lot of time ripping into Mr. Grizz, so I want to end this segment by saying a few things that I like about him. I will say that even though he's disappointing, it is nice that we were able to find out his true identity after all the build-up in Splatoon 2. I also like that his backstory gives us more lore about the Arc Polaris, because we didn't know much about the Arc Polaris until Splatoon 3. And I especially like how after Mr. Grizz dies, Lil Judd takes over Grizzco. I thought that was a really cool decision, especially since Lil Judd is like planning to backstab Judd, so him being in charge of Grizzco will probably help him better achieve that goal. And I'm really excited to see what they do with that. By the way, Mr. Grizz was the third most popular villain according to my poll. So if you voted for Mr. Grizz in the poll, then I'd be interested to hear your reasoning in the comments. Yeah, Order was the least popular villain according to the poll. Understandably so, this is like the most boring villain I've ever seen. It's so boring that I don't even know what to say at this point. Like, it's basically Commander Tarter from Temu, since they're both rogue AIs that want to reshape the world. And that's why I don't like Order. We had this exact same premise in Splatoon 2, except better in every single way. Order is just Tarter, but without any of the things people liked about Tarter, so it's just boring. Although, when you think about it, it is supposed to be a stone-cold AI that wants to rid everyone of their free will, so I guess being boring works in its favor here. Anyway, there is one thing that I genuinely like about Order though, and that is Smollusk. I think Smollusk was handled really well, as it gave us some more insight on Order's backstory and the reasoning behind its actions, since it didn't really explain much. Plus, Smollusk is just really funny. Okay, if I have to talk about Splatoon villains for any longer, I'm gonna throw up. Long story short, Octavio got fumbled, Tarter is really good, Mr. Grizz is disappointing, and Order is boring. So Nintendo, you gotta lock in for the villain of Splatoon 4. See ya.